So much like the symbolism and the messaging of different elements of this novel are different for different people, this idea of suburbia, or what it means to be suburban, is different for a lot of different people. There's really no single definition of suburbia, and that's what suburbia is known for, as being this kind of fluid concept where when you live there, you live there, but it's difficult to define based on who you are, or what your parameters are. There are some ideas that most people connect with suburbia. This idea of mostly middle class people live there. Mostly it's homogenous or cookie cutter houses in a row. There's not a lot of difference or variety. And it's this idea that it's not quite a city, but it's near a city. But it's also not a small town where everyone knows each other. There's that anonymity that you would experience in a city, but there's the quietness, there's the nature that you would experience in a small town or a rural area. So it's kind of a combination of those different things, but everything is also very structured. You don't have the wild nature of a rural area where you don't have forests and that sort of thing, but you also don't have the metallic nature of a city. So it's kind of a combination of those things. At least that's the way I understand it, but according to the definition, people can understand it in lots of different ways. I thought it was interesting too in this, well, I'll call it this particular definition of suburbia that I was reading about from the New York Public Library. It describes how it's an idea, not just a place, but it's also fluid in terms of its becoming and unbecoming different types of areas very quickly. And I think that's really fitting for Karim, who is trying to figure out who he is. He's at this point in his life where he's a teenager, he's a young adult, he's trying to figure out these different identities. So what better place to be than an area that also can become different things? There's also the idea, usually, at least to me, of this in the suburbs, of being kind of bored with the fact that there isn't a lot of variety. There is that homogeny within suburbia. So I think that also inspires Karim and a lot of other teenagers, right? Suburbia is like the typical 1980s movie location for the bored teenager who's trying to get out and make a name for themselves and do something interesting and new and exciting. So in that way, Karim is similar to a lot of teenage protagonists that are in the suburbs. So I think it has that link as a genre to other titles. Also, the idea of homogeny in suburbia is interesting because the title is the Buddha of suburbia, right? And while suburbia is this homogenous, sort of boring place that inspires teenagers to want to break out and rebel, the idea of a Buddha is something very exotic and different. And there is a lot of exoticism in this book that is kind of a different train of thought, but it's interesting that the title takes the idea of suburbia, which can be a boring, plain, cookie cutter area, and also the idea of the Buddha, which is something foreign in terms of being sort of an Eastern concept, where suburbia is more of a Western concept, and putting those things together. So while suburbia and all of its boringness is part of the title itself is not boring because it brings together, it merges these two very different concepts to create sort of a new idea.